All right, so get this. Today we're diving into Telosa.
Telosa.
Yeah, Telosa. It's this, like, proposed city of the future.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the brainchild of billionaire Marc Lore. And it's supposed to be this, like, incredible utopia in the American desert.
I've heard a little bit about it.
Like, imagine, right, a city built from scratch where, like, everything you need is a 15-minute walk or bike ride away.
Sounds pretty ambitious.
It does sound wild, right?
Yeah. Well, Lore is not just some dreamer, you know?
Oh, right, yeah.
He built Jet.com
Oh, yeah, that's right.
and then led Walmart's e-commerce efforts.
Wow.
So he's got, the experience. So when he says he wants to build a city, people, they tend to listen.
Okay, so he's got the entrepreneurial, chops for sure. But what is he actually trying to create here? Is this just like a super efficient city? Or is there like something more to it?
I think it definitely is about efficiency, but I think it goes deeper than that.
All right.
Lore is talking about like a whole new model for society based on what he calls equitism.
Equitism.
Yeah. So think of it as like capitalism, but with a built-in system to share the city's wealth with all its residents.
Okay, so not just about making money, but making sure that everyone benefits from that wealth?
Exactly.
That sounds pretty radical.
Yeah.
Like, where did he even get that idea?
Believe it or not, it's actually based on the theories of Henry George.
Who's Henry George?
He was an economist from the 1800s.
Okay.
And he argued that land should be owned communally.
Communally.
Yeah, with individuals paying like a tax on its value.
Interesting.
And this tax would then fund public services and infrastructure.
Okay, so in Telosa, like, the land wouldn't be privately owned.
That's the idea.
Wow.
A community endowment would own the land, and the revenue generated would, go back to the residents.
Okay, so as the city grows and the land value increases,
Yeah.
everyone prospers.
Exactly. Not just, a select few.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What would it actually be like to live in Telosa? Like, could you walk me through a typical day?
Okay, yeah. So, picture this. You wake up in your apartment, maybe you grab breakfast from a local cafe downstairs.
Okay.
And now, instead of a soul-crushing commute, you have a leisurely 10-minute walk to work, passing parks and green spaces along the way.
Wait, so no more traffic jam?
No traffic jams.
I'm already sold.
Right. So everything in Telosa is designed around this 15-minute city concept.
15-minute city.
Yeah. So work, school, shopping, healthcare, nature, it's all within a 15-minute radius of your home.
Wow.
And since most people wouldn't need cars, the city would be incredibly pedestrian friendly.
That sounds amazing, but also, like, really hard to pull off.
Sure.
Are they actually planning to, like, eliminate car ownership entirely?
Not necessarily eliminate it,
Okay.
but dramatically reduce it.
Okay.
They're betting big on a system of electric autonomous vehicles.
Oh, wow.
Alongside electric bikes and public transit.
So I can imagine hopping on, like, a driverless shuttle that takes me to my destination while I catch up on emails or read a book.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm getting, like, serious sci-fi vibes here.
Yeah.
Speaking of futuristic, what's the deal with this, like, giant skyscraper they keep showing in, like, all the renderings?
Oh, yeah.
The one that looks like it has trees growing on it.
Yeah, that's the Equitism Tower.
Equitism Tower.
It's like the iconic center point of Telosa.
Oh.
It's not just a pretty building, though.
Okay.
They're designing it to be a model of sustainability
Right.
with features like vertical farms to grow food
Uh-huh.
and a massive solar roof to generate energy.
So it's like a self-sustaining ecosystem within a skyscraper.
Kind of, yeah.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah,
But let's be real.
sure.
All of this sounds incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
How are they going to pay for all of this?
That's the $400 billion question, literally. Lore is aiming for a mix of private investment, philanthropy, and government funding.
Wow.
It's a massive gamble, and some critics are, skeptical that he can pull it off.
Yeah, I can see why people would be hesitant.
Yeah.
But even if Telosa never actually gets built,
Yeah.
the ideas behind it are pretty fascinating.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's forcing us to rethink what cities could be
Uh-huh.
and how we can build a more sustainable and equitable future.
All right, so let's say you've finished your workday in Telosa.
Okay.
What happens next? What kind of, like, leisure activities or social life can residents expect?
Well, since everything is so close, you could easily meet friends for dinner at a nearby restaurant,
Okay.
catch a show at a local theater,
Uh-huh.
or just take a stroll through one of the many parks.
That sounds idyllic.
Yeah.
And since there's less time wasted on commuting, people would have more free time to pursue, like, their hobbies and interests.
Exactly. They're also emphasizing the importance of like community spaces and events to foster, a sense of belonging and connection among residents.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It can't just be about efficiency and sustainability.
Right.
It has to be about creating, like, a vibrant and thriving community.
Absolutely.
But what about people who need to travel outside of Telosa?
Yeah, they've thought of that too.
Okay.
The city will have like high-speed rail connections to other major cities.
Uh-huh.
And they're even considering things like electric air taxis for like shorter trips.
Wow. This is starting to sound like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
But I have to ask, with all this, like, advanced technology, won't there be concerns about job displacement?
That's a valid concern. Telosa will rely heavily on automation and artificial intelligence, which could potentially lead to job losses in certain sectors.
So how are they planning to address that?
Well, they're emphasizing the need for retraining and skills development programs to prepare residents for the jobs of the future. They're also talking about like creating new industries and opportunities related to sustainability and technology.
So the idea is to, like, create a workforce that's adaptable and prepared for the changing demands of the job market.
Exactly.
But even with those programs, there's bound to be some pushback, right?
Of course.
From people who are, like, worried about losing their livelihoods.
Yeah, there will be, challenges and disagreements along the way.
Of course.
But that's part of what makes Telosa such a fascinating experiment. It's forcing us to, like, grapple with some of the biggest questions facing our society today.
Right.
Like, how do we balance technological progress with social equity?
Right. Yeah.
How do we create cities that are both sustainable and livable?
It's a bold vision, that's for sure. And even if it doesn't succeed perfectly, I think there's a lot we can learn from Telosa's attempts to, like, reimagine the city of the future.
I completely agree. It's a project worth watching closely.
Yeah.
And I'm eager to see how it develops in the coming years.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the vision behind Telosa, the equitism model, the 15-minute city concept, and even touched on some of the potential challenges.
We did.
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, I think
there's so much more to explore.
Definitely. We haven't even gotten into things like the city's governance structure.
Oh, right.
Its cultural scene or its approach to education.
Well, luckily for our listeners, this is just part one of our deep dives into Telosa. We'll be back next time to delve even deeper into this fascinating project.
And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels so you don't miss out on the next part of our exploration. Welcome back to our deep dive into Telosa.
Last time we were talking about all the cool stuff, like the 15-minute commutes and the futuristic skyscrapers and a system designed to benefit everyone.
Right.
But let's get real for a second. Is this thing actually going to happen? Like, what are some of the roadblocks they might run into? Well, for starters, the price tag.
$400 billion. It's a staggering amount of money.
It's a lot.
Even if Lore manages to attract, big investors, there's still a huge risk involved.
Right.
What if costs spiral out of control?
Yeah.
What if the economy takes a downturn?
Yeah, it's like betting on a unicorn, right?
Yeah.
A super cool unicorn, but still, like, a unicorn.
Yeah.
And even if they can raise the money, building a city from scratch in the middle of the desert, I mean, that presents like a whole other set of challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the logistics of it all.
Yeah.
They'd need to bring in massive amounts of materials, create a reliable water supply, and build an entirely new infrastructure from the ground up.
And that's not even considering, like, the potential environmental impact.
Right.
Yeah, building a city in the desert raises some serious questions about, like, sustainability. How can they claim to be, eco-conscious when they're essentially creating this, like, massive new demand for resources in a fragile ecosystem?
It's a major point of contention for critics. They argue that it's far more sustainable to focus on revitalizing existing cities rather than building new ones. And, there's a valid point there.
Right. Plus, there's, like, the human element to consider, right?
Well, absolutely.
What about the people who already live in the areas where they plan to build Telosa?
Yeah.
Will they be displaced? Will their livelihoods be affected?
Those are absolutely crucial questions, and it's something that, the Telosa team needs to address transparently and ethically.
Right.
They need to engage with, local communities and make sure that their concerns are taken into account.
Okay. So let's assume for a moment that they can, like, overcome all these hurdles, right?
Okay.
The funding, the logistics, the environmental impact. There's still one big question that kind of keeps nagging at me.
Yeah.
Who is Telosa really for?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, Lore talks about creating a more equitable society, a place where everyone benefits. But on the other hand, we're talking about a city with cutting-edge technology, luxurious amenities,
Right.
and a potentially very high cost of living.
Exactly. It's hard to imagine how they can reconcile those two things.
Mm.
Will Telosa truly be like a diverse and inclusive community?
Right.
Or will it just become another like playground for the rich and elite?
That's a valid concern. And to be fair to the Telosa team, they have acknowledged this, potential issue.
Right.
They're talking about implementing, affordable housing initiatives, providing access to education and job training programs,
Okay.
and creating a system where everyone has a stake in the city's success.
But even with those measures in place, there's still a risk that it could become like a self-selecting community, right?
Yeah.
Attracting people with like certain values and lifestyles.
It's almost inevitable that there will be, some level of self-selection. People who are drawn to the idea of living in a highly planned, technologically advanced city will naturally gravitate towards Telosa.
Right. So even if they achieve their goal of like creating a more equitable society within Telosa,
Uh-huh.
there's a chance it could end up like exacerbating inequality outside of its borders.
That's a possibility. It's something we need to be mindful of. I think it's important to remember that Telosa is just one experiment, one potential model for the future. It doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. It's more about sparking a conversation, challenging our assumptions,
Yeah.
and exploring new possibilities.
Exactly.
And even if Telosa never actually gets built, the ideas it's generating are already having an impact.
Absolutely.
Like the 15-minute city concept, for example.
Right.
It's being embraced by urban planners around the world.
It is.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how an idea that seemed like so radical just a few years ago is now starting to gain like mainstream acceptance.
Yeah.
And I think Telosa deserves some credit for that.
Yeah.
It's helped to like shift the conversation and open people's minds to like new possibilities.
It has.
But let's get back to the challenges for a second. We talked about the financial risks and the logistical hurdles, but what about like the political and regulatory landscape?
Oh, that's another major hurdle. Building a new city requires navigating, a complex web of laws, regulations, and permits at both the state and federal level.
Wow.
And there's always the potential for, political opposition or bureaucratic delays.
Plus, there's the question of governance, right?
Right.
How will Telosa be governed? Who will make the decisions?
Yeah.
Will it be a democracy, a technocracy, something else entirely?
Those are like fundamental questions that the Telosa team hasn't fully answered yet. They've talked about creating, a participatory democracy.
Right.
But the details are still fuzzy.
It seems like there's like a tension, right, between the desire for like a highly planned, efficient city
Yeah.
and the principles of like democratic governance.
Right.
Can you really have both?
That's a fascinating question. And it's something we'll need to, watch closely as the project develops.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, the potential downsides, the big unanswered questions.
Uh-huh.
But let's like shift gears for a moment
Okay.
and focus on the positive.
Sure.
What are some of the things that make Telosa's so exciting, so potentially transformative?
Well, one of the most compelling aspects is, the focus on sustainability.
Okay.
They're not just talking about reducing their environmental impact. They're aiming to create a city that's actually like regenerative, a city that gives back more to the planet than it takes.
So they're talking about things like renewable energy, water conservation, waste reduction, and even like carbon capture technology.
Exactly. And they're not just relying on, technology. They're also emphasizing the importance of like nature and green spaces within the city.
Okay.
They're talking about creating urban farms, community gardens, and parks that are like integrated into the very fabric of Telosa.
It's like a vision of a city that's in harmony with nature,
Yeah.
not in conflict with it. And that's incredibly appealing, especially in a world that's like increasingly facing the consequences of climate change.
Absolutely.
And then there's the focus on like community and well-being, right?
Yes.
They're talking about creating a city that's designed to, like, foster social connection, promote healthy lifestyles, and enhance the overall quality of life.
Exactly. They're talking about, like, walkable neighborhoods, vibrant public spaces, accessible healthcare,
Right.
and a strong emphasis on education and lifelong learning.
So it's not just about making life, like, more efficient, but also more enjoyable and less stressful.
Exactly.
But what about the things that can't be automated or digitized? What about, like, the human touch?
Yeah, that's a good point. They've talked about, the importance of creating a sense of community, but it remains to be seen how they'll, like, foster that in a city that's so reliant on technology.
Right. Will people still interact with each other, like, face-to-face?
Yeah.
Or will they be more likely to, like, connect online?
That's a question that only time will tell.
Yeah.
But, it's something to think about as we consider the potential social implications of living in, a highly technological city like Telosa.
Okay, so we've explored the challenges, the opportunities, the potential benefits and drawbacks of Telosa. But there's one question that keeps coming back to me.
Yeah.
Is this really a viable model for the future of cities?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
There are so many unknowns, so many factors that could influence the success or failure of this project.
Right. We've talked about the financial risks, the logistical hurdles, the environmental concerns, the social implications. And even if they can overcome all of those challenges,
Yeah.
there's still the question of, like, whether people actually want to live in a city like Telosa.
Yeah. Will they be willing to give up, some of their individual freedom and autonomy in exchange for the efficiency, sustainability, and community that Telosa promises?
Right. It's a gamble, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's a gamble that's worth taking, in my opinion.
Because even if Telosa doesn't, succeed perfectly, it's pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah.
And it's forcing us to ask, some fundamental questions about how we want to live in the 21st century.
So welcome back to our deep dive into Telosa.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has been.
I mean, we've really put this city under the microscope.
Yeah, we've talked about the potential and the pitfalls.
The vision, the reality checks.
But even with all that, there's something about Telosa that just sparks the imagination.
Absolutely. It's like a giant, like, what-if scenario playing out in the desert, Like,
Right.
What if we could design a city that's truly equitable, sustainable, and fulfilling?
Right. What if we could break free from the limitations of, our current urban models?
Exactly.
It's almost like a thought experiment come to life.
Yeah.
And whether or not it, like, succeeds as a physical city, I think it's already having a ripple effect.
Right.
On the way we think about urban design.
I completely agree. It's pushing the boundaries of what's possible and inspiring other cities to consider, new approaches.
Right.
Take the 15-minute city concept, for example.
Yeah.
That idea has, taken off globally.
It really is.
With cities like Paris and Melbourne, incorporating it into their urban planning strategies.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how a concept that was once considered radical is now becoming mainstream.
Right.
And I think Telosa deserves some credit for that.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's helped to, like, shift the conversation
Yeah.
and open people's minds to new possibilities.
It's also forcing us to, confront some uncomfortable truths about our current cities. The fact that so many people are drawn to the idea of Telosa suggests that there's a deep dissatisfaction with the way we live now.
People are tired of, like, the long commutes, traffic congestion, and social isolation.
Right.
And the feeling that they're just, like, cogs in a machine.
Yeah.
They're looking for a sense of, community, purpose, connection.
And Telosa is tapping into that longing.
Yeah.
Offering a vision of a city that's, designed to meet those needs.
Whether or not they can actually deliver on that promise remains to be seen, though.
It does, yeah.
But even if Telosa falls short of its goals, I think the conversations it's starting are incredibly valuable.
I agree.
It's like forcing us to re-examine our priorities.
Yeah.
And ask ourselves what kind of future we want to create.
It's also highlighting the interconnectedness of our global challenges, right?
Right.
So Telosa isn't just about building a better city.
Yeah.
It's about addressing issues like climate change, social inequality, technological disruption.
It's a reminder that we can't solve these problems in isolation.
No.
We need to think systemically and look for solutions that benefit everyone.
Right, not just a select few.
And that's where Telosa's emphasis on collaboration and innovation comes in, right?
Yeah.
They're not trying to do this alone.
No.
They're actively seeking, like, partners and collaborators from around the world.
They are.
They're working with universities, research institutions, tech companies, even other cities to develop and test new ideas.
Yeah. And that's what makes me, like, cautiously optimistic about this project.
All right.
Even if Telosa itself, doesn't succeed.
Yeah.
The knowledge and innovations that come out of it could have a lasting impact.
Think about, like, the potential for advancements in, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, smart transportation, even like social governance.
Exactly.
These are areas where Telosa could make significant contributions.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether the city itself becomes a reality.
Right. It's also worth noting that, Telosa is attracting some of the brightest minds in their respective fields.
Right.
Architects, engineers, urban planners, social scientists, technologists.
But all coming together.
They're all coming together to try to, crack the code on building a better future.
And that kind of brain power focused on solving these critical challenges is something to be excited about. Absolutely.
Even if Telosa only serves as a catalyst for innovation,
Yeah.
that's still a huge win for humanity.
It's also a reminder that we don't have to accept the status quo, right?
Right.
We can challenge conventional wisdom, push the boundaries of what's possible, and, dream big.
And who knows, maybe some of those dreams will eventually become reality.
Yeah.
Helping to create, a more equitable, sustainable, and fulfilling world for all of us.
So while we wait to see what becomes of Telosa, let's keep our minds open to the possibilities and continue to, explore the big ideas that it's bringing to the forefront.
Well said. This deep dive into Telosa has been a fascinating journey.
It has.
Full of twists and turns, hopes and doubts.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure.
What's that?
It's a project that's worth paying attention to.
Absolutely. And we'll be right here following its progress and keeping you informed along the way.
And in the meantime, if you're as intrigued by this idea of, reimagining the future as we are,
be sure to check out our other deep dives on, fascinating topics.
Yeah, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify.
Just search for The Deep Dive.
We'll be back soon.
With more explorations of, the world's most thought-provoking ideas.
Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.